Today we are continuing on in our Master Studies series. So in these demonstrations, I am showing you how I study a master artist and learn things from them to apply to my own art. So if you haven't seen that first video, I will provide a link in the description. Now, in that first video, we talked about observation, just picking it apart and really studying the artwork itself before we do any sort of drawing. And then I came up with a plan for 4 different focus studies. So before we go and we copy one-to-one the original artwork, we are going to do these little mini focused studies to really focus on different aspects that I felt were like the strongest points in the artwork. So in this particular artwork, I noted the composition and the color, line, and then unity and variety. So there's different ways you could do a composition study. There's different ways to do a color study. There's different ways to do a line study. So I'm just going to show you one example of how I do this. And for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to keep it to the composition, the color, and the line. The unity and variety, that observation that I made was more about the creature design itself. There was some texture and like unity and variety in the butterflies and like the grasses and stuff like that. But I felt like the thing that stuck out to me about the unity and variety was the design itself, that we had several horse-like creatures or 4-legged hoofed animals combined into all in one. And I feel like that is something that I want to apply more after I am done doing all of my other studies. And this is how I'm going to apply it to my own work. So we'll just focus on the 3 for today. So the first one I'm going to get into is the line study. Different people will talk about tracing. Tracing as a bad thing, tracing as a good thing, tracing as a tool. I'm going to show you probably one of the best ways to use tracing as a tool. And here's the thing, I'm not just going to trace. What I am doing here is I am going to trace over the original artwork, and I am going to really get a feel for the types of movements required to get the sort of line work that she's getting. I'm noticing a lot of very confident line work where they're good, strong, and bold marks and lengthened out. As I'm working on this, I can tell that she knows the anatomy of the horse really, really well. I'm getting muscle lines, I'm getting markings. Everything is very intentionally placed. I'm just trying to mimic the movements and really learn how her hand would probably move to create these strokes. I'm creating that muscle memory in order to teach myself. And I'm not going to go through and trace everything, but I am specifically focusing on this area of where the face is and where the lemur is, just because I feel like that's where the focal point is, and that's really what I want to capture. And I will noodle around a little bit in the leaves and stuff to kind of get a handle on the textures that she's creating, but I'm not going to do this excessively. So once I've kind of got my practice bits in here, I've done a little bit of work to try and create some muscle memory. Now I'm going to try and apply it, and I'm going to try and draw it side by side. So now this is just me freehanding, and I'm going to try and get as close as I can, especially in those areas that I particularly practiced. And in this one, again, I'm focusing on that head and that structure because I feel like that's the focal point. That's where the majority of the detail is. That's what I want to capture. Now, once I've gotten to a certain point, I'm actually going to check my work. I'm going to slide my drawing over top of her original drawing and see just how close I got. Now, I'm going to be honest, I struggle with the noses and stuff like that, so I'm really shocked I got as close as I did on the whole mouth and nose structure. But when I looked at other things, I just made some mental notes. Okay, the eye was smaller than I anticipated. I needed to move the ear. The neck was shorter than I thought it would be. A thinner neck. So I'm making notes. I'm making notes of things I need to work on once I get to that final copying stage. Moving on to the color study. My goal with the color study is really to capture the colors and the overall color scheme and how the colors complement each other. We picked out an analogous color scheme, so we've got the blue, green, and yellow kind of all next to each other on the color wheel. Now, I am going to just block colors in. I'm not going to focus on the anatomy. I'm not going to focus heavily on getting things correct. I am only focusing on the color. So that's the advantage to doing these focus studies, is I can really get in there and dig in deep to the one element I'm focusing on without having to painstakingly recreate everything detail by detail. I will try and create just kind of the general composition, just because the colors are a part of all of that. But once I get to a good stopping point, I guess, to where I'm satisfied with the color work, you'll see that I tried to recreate kind of that bounce light on the lower right-hand side of the belly. So then I'm actually going to come in after all of that, and I am going to check my work once again. I'm going to just pick the color and then color match. So I've got hers on the left side and mine on the right side. And you'll see that a lot of the colors I did get pretty darn close. I'm happy about that. You can do this in a traditional sense. Sometimes it's helpful to print out the image and then you can compare that way. So, and you can do this in whatever medium you want. Now, obviously, I'm working digitally, mainly because it's easier to record and share. But if I were to do this traditionally, I know that the original was done in alcohol markers. So am I going to have all of the same alcohol markers that she did? Maybe not. But maybe I can get something close by blending. And we're just working to get that, you're really training your eye. You're training your eye to see the colors that are actually there instead of the colors that you think you see. Because the eyes play tricks. Now, moving on to the composition study. So this is the shortest of the 3 studies that I will do. Mainly because all I'm doing is I am trying to understand why this image works. Why does it look so dynamic? So I'm going to start noodling around, doodling, and just kind of following the leading lines, really, and figuring out where does all of this like energy and things point to. And you'll see that I do come to a general consensus of where my focal point is. Now, what compositional rule does this fall into? And that's a little bit more of a gray area because it technically could fit into several, but I'm going to show you kind of my process on really what I came down to. So once again, I'm just drawing over top and testing. Is it rule of thirds? Is it an S curve? Is it an L shape? Is it more of a pyramid? Now, I actually feel like it falls really well into the golden spiral. And I'll show you this in just a sec here. I'm going to trace over. I kind of resized the golden spiral to kind of fit how I felt like it ought to, even though it's not exact. But again, I made some additional discoveries that, okay, I didn't realize that the butterflies were actually part of the spiral and how the butterflies would bridge gaps. It bridged gaps between the feet on the bottom side, and it bridged gaps from flowing through the head all the way back down to the lemur, to where the lemur was a part of the whole spiral, following back up to the neck. Now, my first pass through, I was just following the lemur into his face, into his neck and spine. I didn't realize that the feet and the outer part of the neck were actually their own separate arc. So once I actually sat down and really put all this in, I thought it fell really well into the golden spiral. And once again, afterwards, I'm just making additional notes. This is the whole purpose of these focus studies. I'm not focusing on anatomy right now. I'm not focusing on the color. I'm not focusing on texture. All I'm focusing on is the composition and why this works. So now, with my 3 focus studies done, I've got a lot of mental notes in mind as I go into the final, just copying 1-to-1, so that I can create the best version of this that I possibly can. And because I've written all these things down, and because I've formed that muscle memory with the colors, with the line, with the composition, these are all going into my visual library. These are all things that I can take away, and I feel like I've really captured a little bit of just how Terryl Whitlatch actually draws. Sometimes I feel like we can do master studies and we can do all of these different exercises just for the sake of doing them, rather for the intention of actually learning what we're trying to accomplish. So I hope this was helpful for you. And if you like this sort of content, please consider subscribing and comment down below what else you'd like to see.